Hey now.
Hey now.
Hey now.
Welcome to our podcast.
Yes, today we have a very special guest, our very first guest, Bryson
The
Jones. The
infamous Bryson
infamous,
Jones.
yes,
Welcome, bro.
who we've both had the pleasure of knowing for many, many years. Super
Yeah.
great, extremely talented musician, has performed all over the world with his music, and then now has a company of your own. Tell us about that.
North Shore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm from the South, this is not a made up character. You know, and so I grew up in the South and kind of had the classic, go west, go to California dream. And came out here and then like had a very funny experience of like coming out here and just sort of being like, oh wow, this is really maybe not me. And then I found my own version. I love the episode y'all did about finding yourself, because for me it was like, yeah, I basically found my own version of like the California dream, right? Um, and had sort of a weird thing where the way I talk about my progression through my career was that I got to a point where I wasn't conscious, but I came to a point where I would not allow myself to succeed. My wife has a great, my wife says, she says, everything you think you can't do, you've already done. And
Right.
so I was this person that would get pulled into things and then immediately go, no, 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 no. Right. So when I started to get my head together in my mid 30s, uh, I was in the middle of like what was probably one of my most notable. It wasn't financially successful, but like I got to play with like Keith Richards and Glenn Campbell and Steve
Wow.
Earle and Lucinda Williams and all these people that I like idolized. I just would, so I was in this wild sort of circle of people, but I recognized that like I was not going to allow myself to be successful. So the way that I talk to people about that, and by that point I had started a career in technology, and which I'd started when I was about 30. Like my 20s were just like the classic lost rock and roll craziness. And then in my 30s, I was like, okay, you should get it together. I think that's for men. I think 30 is a big point. And then I started working in technology and film and TV technology, and had
And
an
wait,
aptitude
just to
towards
put
it.
this in perspective for the guests, you're fifth generation from a farm
Yo,
family,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Like my whole family are farmers.
Big
Like
thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, my
Arkansas.
Yeah,
grandfather.
yeah.
Yeah, my dad. Yeah, oh no, it's a huge thing. The greatest story about that is that, well, it's a couple things. One, my grandfather, like when he was 8 years old, they put their stuff in the Depression. They put their stuff on a raft on a river in Arkansas and went down the river with the family. And they got off at a place called Oil Trough, which is a beautifully named town. Not for the expensive oil; it was for bear oil. So there was
That's
no oil country going
What
to happen.
what is bear oil?
Well, it's like they render the fat of bears. Apparently, it was like a
yeah.
thing that they
Oh,
use for like cosmetic.
oh,
Oh no, it's
really
bear
bear.
oil, like from like bears. Crazy.
I was thinking
And
like naked
so,
bear, bear
yeah,
oil.
yeah, no, yeah, yeah. And so like, and then he got down there, and I think my dad told me the story this year. He said that he thought he had just made it because he at 8 years old he could get a job for like 50 cents a day picking cotton. And so as a child he picked cotton, and then he literally had the American dream all the way to like, being a wealthy man and owning a bunch of land. But yeah, so my whole family are farmers. And then the story I tell is he's actually like my oldest friend, and we're close to this day, but it just shows you where I came from. When I was a high achiever in school, so I'd gone to this super fancy college in Arkansas, and I quit and I said, hey, I'm going to go to Los Angeles and be a musician. And my friend was sitting in the living room of his house with me. And he just, it's so funny because I tease him about it. He just goes, how? And that's all I said. It wasn't like, hey, man, good luck. You can do it. There was none of that. It was just like, how? It was like I'd said I was going to go to the moon,
More
right?
or
Wow.
less, how are you going to do this? How
How?
are you going to achieve this?
How are you going to do it? I think it pointed out to me as I look at it later that like it was the idea that you could just get in your car and drive to California was insane, right?
And
Yeah.
some people don't have that. Yeah, they don't realize. And you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
it,
Yeah.
like, I
So
could do
yeah.
that.
So that was pretty different. And also it was like I think that was really limiting for me. Like I came from a place where you were like farmer, doctor, lawyer, right? You know what I mean? Like that was it, right? And if you
Oh,
didn't do that, you weren't going to be successful in any way. And I think there was a lack of imagination that I certainly suffered from too, because then it was like, how could you? So
yeah.
even when I achieved things, I had like a major label record deal when I was like 25. And even then, I love it. I moved home. They like sort of sent me home because they were like, well, you should go back to the South and like write and stuff. And I went back, and I remember I had made friends in the town where I'm from, and I came one day. These two girls that I was running around with, they came to my house, and I was staying with my mom, and I would hub out to different cities. I'd go to Nashville, I'd go to Memphis, and so I was having this really cool, kind of interesting time of my life. And my check had come, like they paid me like a monthly, stipend. And my check came, and it had the Warner Brothers logo on the thing, and it had, Bugs Bunny in the logo. And the check came, and my mom was like, "Hey, your a check came for you." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I was like, and I picked it up, and they looked at it, and it was really funny. They both said, "Oh, like we thought you just made that up." And it made me laugh at two things. One that it was so foreign, but also two that they would just let me do that and not busted me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, they were really polite. They just thought, oh yeah, this guy's delusional.
Oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. They're like, "Yeah, sure, you got
But
a record
how
label with Warner Brothers.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
what would you like for dinner tonight? We're just gonna
yeah.
ignore
yeah,
that
yeah,
he's
yeah.
he's
And they're
gone
like, "Prove
crazy."
it."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
how
but I love that they never would. They just were like, okay, we can just let this guy talk. But what's
I
interesting
love
about that, I'll tell you, that happened to me, through getting my head together, right? Later, I got, I never thought about what losing that, so I lost my record deal after just like a really short time, and never got to make a record, and it was such a part of who I was, right? Like you can imagine, you're like 25 and I'm going to go to California and make it, and then you get the thing that you think is, success, and then you realize that, oh, success is just a ladder, like, Richard, you and I have talked about it. It's like success, you do this, and then what, and then what, and then what. And if you're in that climb and you think there's a destination, it can be really devastating. And so for me, I was like, oh, this is a destination, or this is at least the step to the real, like, swimming pools, movie stars, to use an Arkansas reference. And what was funny about it was that, um, they dropped me from the label. I got the call. I fell down on my knees and I cried. And then I think the next day or the day after, I went back and got my job at the music store where I had worked before, and was like, hey, do you want fries with that? Within like 2 days. And I never thought about it. I never talked about it. I just was like, yeah, that's over. And I
Mm,
never considered the fact of like how that could be traumatic, right? And so probably, I don't know, years later, probably I would say probably 15 years later, I went to a meeting with my former A&R guy who was in a different part of the industry, and we were hanging out, and he said, "I thought I killed you." He said, "When I made that phone call, I thought I had killed you." And it didn't hit me then. And it took another probably 10 more years, and then I was at an event that was at this iconic LA like country club and venue, not like country fancy like golf club, but like country music club. And
oh,
they had a reunion, right? Yeah, like different country club. And
different.
so I had a reunion, and I was outside talking, and this is the way I talk about that transition. And so I was outside, and a friend of mine who was in the industry, and we'd been friends when we were pups, man. When I was like 21, I hung out with him and his buddies, but he didn't know that like I played the kind of music I played. So he was telling me, he's like, I don't know how I missed you. And like I realize now, like I would have loved your music back then and stuff. And then as we got older, we bonded and knew, became friendly and stuff. But as he was saying that, I said, oh well, I was different. I didn't know who I was, and I wasn't playing this kind of music and whatever. We're talking about that. And I somehow was talking to this one next to him. I started surfing at 45. I started surfing, which I do. I recommend and I don't recommend. But anyway, it's
So
super hard.
awesome, though. Yeah,
It's super fun, but like you have
yeah.
to be just willing to like be comfortable not being great. Like you can't be attached to that, because that sport is so hard and it's a lifetime sport. But anyway, I was talking to this woman and she was from Ventura. We're talking about surfing. And then she asked me a question about something. I guess she asked me when, this is key, like when I'd known this guy, something had happened. It came up and I said, well, I said, when you're 25 and a giant corporation destroys your whole life stream, they don't give you therapy. I said, they just kind of kick you out on the street. And that was my flippant way of discussing it. And she looked at me and I mean, I don't know this woman. And she just said, that must have been incredibly painful.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things that just like went through me, and I was like I have to go home and think
Yeah.
about this for a year. You know what I mean? Because I don't know why, but I'd never associated that that could be a traumatic event. Right?
Right.
To me, it was just like, oh, it's like I lost a job at McDonald's. It was like, oh yeah, 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 and then I did something else. No, like you had built your life up to that point to do this thing, and then it was snatched. And and that was it was interesting. And after that, I was able to have a lot better, uh, make a lot more peace with art, in a way. And the reason I say that is that just to wrap up a really long telling of this is that
No, it's been
that's
fascinating.
me. Y'all know me.
N-
Basically, I ended up, I ended up figuring out along the way that I was not going to allow myself to be successful at art for whatever was going on in my brain. Something was implanted in my software that was not going to let me do this. Even when I succeeded, I was famous for shooting myself in the foot. In the late 80s, I was known in the industry as this kid who had turned down 5 major record deals. I just turned down crazy opportunities. I would just no, 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 no. Just refuse, flat refuse. I had like platinum selling bands ask me to like audition and I'd just be like, no. And I realize now that that was fear of success, fear of
Mhm.
failure, right? All that stuff, right? It's too big. I'm too
Mhm.
small. I can't do that. And if I don't play, they won't find out. And so it took me decades to unpack that, right? So what really is interesting about the story about my company now and my trajectory in technology is that I became, y'all met me when I was really crazy and getting my stuff together. And you got to watch me change. And what you saw was you saw me come to be able to have what I'll call a job, a successful job. And then I was able to have I got to have a successful marriage. Very happily married now. Been with, my wife for 15 years and married for well over 10. And then now able to have a career which could blossom into success. And Richard, you and I talk a lot about like taking that governor off. And so for
Right.
me, that was the thing that's really interesting is
Wait,
that like,
what's the governor?
what was that?
What's the governor?
Just a limiting belief, a
Ah,
limiting
okay.
belief of
Oh,
like, I can only go this high, right?
yeah.
I can go up and then there's something in me, nowhere else that stops me. And that's something that I've only recently had a discovery about. But it's interesting because yeah, so now I have a pretty successful, software company in a field that is, kind of unlimited. And but that's been a long struggle for me to not to work hard because I learned to do that from the farmers, right? Not to be smart because I learned to do that to get validation, not to be creative, but a struggle to just simply allow, right? Like that's so my story is at this point is the I now don't succeed so I get something necessarily. I succeed because part of my gift back to the world is that I need to be a light and I need to show people that you can come from that. And for me, that whole pitch is like, Rich, you and I talk so much about our stories. My story is not one of like trauma from specific things. It's from self-inflicted wounds, right?
Right.
The call is coming from inside the house.
Yeah, I find it amazing, like the conversations that we have and the limitations we put on ourselves, and then we don't even realize those limitations exist because they were
Oh,
programmed into us.
oh,
Like you just said, you had this
yeah.
belief that you could only hit a limit and you could only be that successful. But once you break through that mindset of I can do anything I put my mind to, and you and I have had this conversation in depth. I mean, just the other day. I mean, but how beautiful to get to that point where you can let that go and then you start to soar. It's
Well,
like you cut the bands, you know what I mean? The ties
no,
that bind you to your past.
Yes.
yeah, the thing that you just said, anything I can set my mind to, right?
Right.
My problem was in my mind, right? So
Right.
so, you know, it wasn't anything I could conceive of because I could conceive of a lot, but I could not set my mind. My mind was set here, right? Not here, right? And that was
Right.
the idea. Can I get out of my way and get out of like my mind's limitations? But yeah, man. So yeah. So I mean, so that's my background. Now, you know, I can tell you like you know, I'm well known in my industry. I invented several things that made certain types of television possible. You know, I worked on Deadliest Catch. I worked on Celebrity Rehab, and you know, like invented ways of making television possible at scale that like people hadn't done at a certain like budget. I was able to do that and make a lot of television possible. And now I advise crazy giant companies. You know, I work for most of the big networks that you see on TV, and it's fascinating, you know. And I laugh, you know. I did it looking like a member of Leonard Skinner, which is also kind of fun for me. So you know,
ZZ Top.
yeah, yeah, very strong
Wait,
ZZ Top now. But yeah,
go back really quick. Let me just ask you a quick question though. You know, you said it's my mind, and you were limited
Yeah.
in your beliefs. What? How did you get past that? What did you do to then feel successful, or to allow yourself to step into your own?
yeah, right. So it's
God, how
uh
did you get the governor,
it's
as you call
yeah, right. So and you said this like that you don't realize you have, right? So for me, the way it worked, and I am also a big person that's like I'm not like a like for me, I got into a 12-step program for codependency because and for friends and family of alcoholics. I got into that because I was struggling with that. But I'm not somebody who believes that there's one way to an answer. But I do think that like the concept of self-help is limited at first because your self is pretty broken, right? So using the thing that's broken to fix the thing that's broken is really hard. So for me, it was a sort of like outside help, right? Could I actually get honest with people? And that for me, like a 12-step program helped me with that. So I was able to like, okay, get honest. The thing that I was limited though, and this took me, it really took me 20 years to get to it, is what you're talking about there is uh, a limiting belief, which I didn't really understand. And I didn't have a framework for that. Um, my wife is amazing. And she solved a problem about some limiting beliefs herself, and she sort of came across this way of like writing and journaling and exercises. And I journal not a lot. I'm like not a big writer, and so and used to, I couldn't do it at all. And so I saw that and was like, "Oh, that's very nice for you. I'm glad that your life has changed and your everything works for you now." But for me, I was like, "I'm still here. I'm gonna ride this train for a few more years." And I joke about like, that's a sign of a great marriage when your partner will let you just be whatever you are. So for me, what it took was uncovering something. I knew this was happening, and I had done all these strategies to make it work. So my business was reasonably successful because I'd learned to trick myself and I'd put things in place to help me. But I still had this thing where I knew, like, don't trust me, right? I would literally tell people in business, I'd be like, you make that decision because don't trust my brain. I had that awareness, right? And, they say, all the AA guys say, they say that big, like, say, knowledge availed us nothing. So I knew this was a problem. I knew this was a problem for probably close to 20 years. I think if I think back and look at it, probably about 17, 18 years, I knew this was a problem. I was powerless to overcome it. And what happened for me was I had an opportunity in my business uh, that we caught a break, and we caught a break in technology that was so big that it was like, well, this is mostly inevitable. And like any good codependent, I sometimes struggle to do things for myself, but man, I can help anybody else. And I
Yeah.
knew that I wanted to do right by my wife. I wanted to do right by everyone that worked in my company. I wanted my company to succeed. And I knew that as the guy, one of the guys running it, I, you know, corporations are interesting because corporations are just kind of this but if you have a private company, it really follows the management chain, like, it has your style. for better or worse. And so for me, I realized that if I didn't solve this, I was not just going to deny myself of this opportunity, but everyone around me. This was big enough that this would like life changing for everybody. And so thank God for that, right? Like, thank God for like that awareness, and then thank God for like caring about, and it's a defect, but it's like caring about people more than yourself. Although I do love and care for myself now, this was a driver for me, and so I was like, okay, and I started talking to friends. I talked about all these different things. I was looking into psychedelic therapy. I was looking into all these different things. I was like, what am I going to do? Because I knew, like what you said, I knew that it was something in me so deep I didn't understand it and I couldn't voice it. And I had a rough day, and I worked with my wife on something sort of creative, and I felt horrible, and I sat down, and I actually ended up accidentally, through talking to my wife, I uncovered this thing unconsciously. And really what the belief was is that I realized that I had shame around asking for things, asking for money, asking for help. It was shameful for me. And I'm not a big person to like blame the people that raised me. Like I now understand that like everyone's just doing the best they can, and I didn't have like abuse like some people had. I had a really, really nice upbringing, but I got some incorrect ideas on the way up, and wasn't able to like counteract those, didn't have anybody to run them by. And so one of those bad ideas I got was this idea that it was somehow shameful to ask for money, to ask for support, for ask for things. And I was needless and wantless is a term they use sometimes, like a child, just, like, and I don't even know where I got that idea. Everybody was there, and like I never went hungry, all that stuff that people struggle with, but somehow in my brain I got this thing where none for me. I have a friend, and her license plate says, "Oh, no thanks." And I think that's so genius because it has so many meanings, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, you could be like, hey, do you want to go? No, hey, do you want to go on a date? No, no thanks. There's just so many things, but that like this motion, if anyone's watching on video, holding my
Yeah.
hands up, that
Yeah.
motion is how I describe the limiter, right? Oh no, oh, not for me.
Yeah,
And
push it away.
And it's like
yeah, and
people do that too when they're offered something at a party. Would you like something to drink? And they're thirsty, but they don't want to be a burden. Oh, no, thanks.
oh,
Even though they're like, and then they go, oh God, I'm going to go drink some water out of the bathroom sink because I'm really thirsty, but I didn't want to be a bother.
oh, yeah,
So
yeah. Chew my arm off. Yeah,
go for it.
chew my
Yeah.
arm off before sorry, chew my arm off before I put you out. Absolutely right. When
Yeah.
Right.
someone wants to do for you, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, I relate to what you were saying as far as that, like, where did it come from? You don't even know where it came from, that limitation. My upbringing, same thing. I couldn't understand or wrap my head around, like, why do I react the way I do? Why do I limit myself? Why am I not further along? And that crippled me by always saying to myself, why am I not further along? So I thought there was something wrong with me. And then it was like, well, who am I trying to prove to that I am successful? And then when you come from a situation where you're only being paid a certain amount to do a certain job, and everyone around you is getting paid 5 times as much, you start to think, is there something wrong with me? But or then why am I being held down? And you don't even realize you're being held down until you get away from that aspect of it, or that environment that is holding you down. Like, you went out to California, same thing with for myself. I broke away from it, and then I realized, wow, the sky's the limit. I could do whatever I want, but those limitations were still there, and I still had a hard time. I was talking to Faleena the other day about just asking for what I am worth, and that's a big
Oh
deal.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
yeah,
I so I remember your episode, and I'll age myself here. That I remember I worked for less, but I remember getting paychecks where I made $2.50 an hour, and
Yeah.
and I actively remember that that and so and all. So yeah, I mean that's a long way to come to being like where I am now. I mean my consulting rate is crazy, and I get it's funny you mentioned around the music. I get flown around the world to speak and consult, and so and that's a weird thing. But again, part of my mechanism, and actually this does work to a certain point. When I started to get somewhat successful, I would find other people to sell me, right? I would find other people to front the sales part of it. So they would ask what I was worth. And I remember one time a guy was like, okay, I remember there was a job I wanted to do, I didn't want to do. And they were like, okay, you got to go to London for 2 days. And I was like, man, I don't want to go to London for 2 days. What a hassle. You know what I mean? Like, what a nightmare. Right. And so, but this giant, one of the big FANG companies, wanted me to go to London. And so I was like, okay, I just told the guy that worked for me, I was like, you just work it out. I'll do it because I know we got to do the deal. And he charged like twice as much as I would have charged at the time for my rate.
Mhm.
And he made them get me business class, like lie flat airfare. And I was like, and I just remember
Can
thinking
you
like,
do everything for me, please? You know, like,
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah. But I remember thinking like, oh, they're never going to go for that. Right. And then like, they just were like, yeah, of course. Because another great lesson, my limitations, right, about what money is, right? That company is literally consistently one of the top 5 companies in the world. And so they're like, they don't have my hangups about bread. They're like, hey, this guy needs to go to London. They're like, great. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And you know what I mean? And that was another great lesson there. Like this guy, yeah, we got to get this guy from California to London. Boy, it's going to be a nightmare. You know what? We better let him sleep on the flight, right?
yeah,
That's all
that's
they
what
thought. And
they want you to
yeah,
be
and
prepared to get there. They're like, we need to give him a good night's sleep, so let's get him a
yeah,
proper plane flight because we want him to be at his best when he arrives. We want him to love us, so we're going to give him the best situation. We're going to
Right.
yeah,
pay him
yeah, oh
well,
yeah,
grateful. There's so many reasons, but you're right. We price ourselves out of that stuff when you don't come from a background where you think that you can
no,
ask for your worth, or if you come from a place that has no money. Like we had zero money. My mom
Right.
was a waitress for Denny's
It's
well
that
into
lack
my
thereof attitude.
teens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
and then she ended up working for Wells Fargo and changed her life. But before that, she was a singer like you, and she was working at Denny's to pay for her stuff. And so we grew up counting coins to take them to the bank with the rolls from her tips.
yeah,
Right.
To then realize you can actually allow abundance in your life is a big deal. So to have somebody
yeah.
do it for you is pretty awesome. That
one
was
of the
great that you did
things
that.
one of the things I realized, just by you mentioning, you turned it over to your one of your guys at work for you to say, you handle this, right?
Yeah.
So, that's been part of my thing as well, especially with construction. I can't do every aspect of the job.
Yeah.
So I took a back seat, but then I have this mentality of I look at everything as like, building a team six, a SEAL team six. You need a guy to break the door down, you need a sniper, you need, blah, blah, blah. So when I realized that I don't have to do every single aspect of the job, like you
Yeah.
just said, well, then you get to turn some responsibility over. You build a team, the team works as a unit, and then the unit grows and gets strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to like, and then but think of this. What if you were like me? You were the person that chose the wrong person every time, right? Like my history, right? My history is I just choose the lower companion always, right? So that's the other thing that's really funny is that if you look at that and you follow the thread, you're like, okay, first you learn to think that you deserve to have good people around you, right? People you
Right.
can trust. And then,
Right.
then you go, and that's a whole thing too, so it's a it's a whole thing.
You know
People.
what?
What
I
was
think
that?
we should remember this. I want to have you back and talk just about that, about how you allow good people in your life, because we have a topic we want to drop on you, and it's kind of related.
Well,
So
yeah. Well, so I guess you're laughing. We're going through this whole damn thing.
you
Run,
know,
drop your
I want
topic. Come on.
we got the
Yeah.
top we got
Bring it.
we got the topic, but I love that, and that is like a
Yeah,
whole episode in and of
yeah,
itself.
yeah.
How,
No,
because that will help our listeners so much, and us, because we love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the topic. Go for it.
All right. So the topic we'd like to know, you've already
Drum
mentioned
roll,
this.
drum roll.
Yeah. You've already mentioned this a little bit, as far as your wife and the relationship you have with your wife. How do you sustain a happy marriage? Because
And
I've
that's
done
it.
it. Well, okay.
That's the topic.
Yeah. That's the topic.
And also kind of branching off, because you just said your picker was off, and you guys, I know from the beginning.
yeah,
I'm just gonna share this part. You had said to a friend, "I want somebody like her," and they said,
yeah,
"Well, she's single. Why don't you go ask her?
yeah,
Why
yeah.
find
Right.
somebody like her?" So go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, no, yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, it was our friend Tom W.
yeah,
And so, yeah. Well, so the first answer is And it's, I don't want to, when I speak in glowing terms about my wife about this stuff, I think that it's like, one, she had the core concepts that we use every day. She
Right.
had those concepts and said them first. But I give myself credit for saying, okay, like the
Like,
most transformative thing,
okay.
the most transformative thing is how you talk about each other and how you think about each other. Okay. So going, to the right after that period, right? I would always be like self-deprecating humor. Oh, you're gonna get sick of me. So she would say, "Oh, you're great. I love you so much. You're a great guy." And I'd be like, you'll get sick of me." And the first time I did that, she stopped me and was like, "Hold on. No, don't ever speak about our relationship in negative terms. It's like, even if you're
Oh,
Absolutely.
joking."
wow.
So
Yes.
we're not allowed, and we have never once spoken in negative terms about our relationship. There's
Wow.
no negativity. Now that doesn't mean we haven't argued and fought. It doesn't mean that we all that, right? But we do not. So when you talk about maintaining that gratitude, right? The and I talk about this is very funny, like the married with children, right? The, if you think about, like the dad and the mom, it's Katie Seagal. It's like, she's beautiful, she's amazing. And the
Yeah.
way he talks about her is like, oh, the old bag or whatever. And
Right,
that's
right.
in our culture. That's what you do.
That's what's
Richard and
emulated.
I talk. Yeah, what? What
Yeah,
was that?
that's what's emulated to us. It's
Yeah, right. And
sensational.
Richard and I talk about that. That like the way men are like programmed to be men. You say that, and you're, oh, but that's all. Like what she would say to me was, she's like, that's all defensiveness. You're like putting someone down, so you're kind of okay if it doesn't work out,
Right.
right? And
Mm,
so for us, it was like if you really read up on that stuff, that's what that is. So for us, it was like, okay, no, you can't do that. And
mm.
so that's one piece. The second thing is, um, we express, and it sounds so hippie, man. It sounds so hippie, but we express our gratitude. We don't be like, oh, I'm expressing my gratitude for you, but we appreciate each other and we say it. So
Yeah.
there's several times a day, I love you, you're amazing, you're beautiful, you're smart. When my wife does something that's to be proud of, I call it out. And it's weird, but
It's not weird.
you
It's
It's
not
not
yeah,
weird.
well,
weird.
no, but
Well,
It's
yeah, it's sadly somewhat unusual, right? It's not weird. It actually makes sense because you're programming yourself. I work for we make computer software, and computers do what you tell them. You program in the steps to get the
yep.
outcome that you want. So why would you not program into your life that, right? So there's
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Um, we use the we we if you look at the 12 steps of any of the 12-step programs, it's like the steps are about, they say is about, your relationship with yourself, and the traditions, which there's also 12 traditions, that's about how you live in groups. So we have a lot of the traditions in our relationship because we're both kind of 12-steppy people. So even if you don't like go to those meetings, it's like you can read those traditions and understand that they talk about how to deal with each other. There's a great book. There's a woman called not. It's really funny. Her name is Pia Melody, not Melody Beatty. Always does this. Her name's Pia Melody. She wrote 3 or 4 books. She has a book that's for couples that's called The Intimacy Factor, and it
mm,
it says um, her best definition of intimacy is sharing your honest reality with someone, having them share their honest reality with you, and neither of you trying to change the other. And
Right.
big
that's
applause.
yeah, no,
Well,
no, but right, but that's a tall order
It
because
is,
right,
but
So
yeah,
Richard paid. So Richard was friends with my wife and was friends with me. So when we got together, he's probably closer actually to my wife. And Richard fulfilled a huge duty for us. I am a perfectionist. My wife is not. That's why she can do more art and than me,
yeah.
and is more productive than me. But
really good at that,
when
yeah.
we went to hang pictures, I can't hang a picture because if that picture is not exactly level, I go crazy and lined up. So she just wanted pictures on the wall, and it's the only thing we would ever consistently argue about. And she was like, I'm calling Richard. He's going to help me hang the pictures. I can allow that, right? It's like, you know what? Yeah, do that, right? Do that. Please do that with Richard because I can't do it with you. So that's
Right.
sort of idea of, right?
Well, make
That's
no mistakes,
knowing your limitations and your strengths.
and make no mistakes. I put a level on every one of those for you, bro.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. That was also helpful because I know, but yeah,
You
You
know,
know,
I wanted to share
so
something.
those are things there. But then, yeah, let's think about it. What else?
I wanted to share something about that you just brought up. You
Please.
said where you do something where they express their honesty, the other express their honesty, and they don't try to change each other. My mom and my dad, actually my stepdad, but raised me since I was 3. He was an atheist and she was Catholic, and they never fought about it because they never tried to change the other, and it was really brilliant. So we went to CCD school and stuff like that, catechism, and did all that stuff, and he didn't have any problem with it. He never tried to change, and it's that's if people could do that with everything, it's
Oh no,
harmony.
it's a lesson for life, right? If
yeah,
you look at it, I have a lot of, I come from the deep South. I have a ton of friends who are, my wife's spirituality is completely different than mine. Like, there's overlap, but completely, pretty different. I have friends of mine that, believe differently about almost everything than I do. But
Right.
we have a common thing, and so we can get along, right? Like I surf with people that if we probably weren't talking about surfing and surfing together, we might not get along. We might get in all kinds of fights and arguments, but we're here to surf and we like surfing and we're here there. And so what's great is that if you don't need to fit the whole world to your position, right? Um,
right.
like that's a big deal. Yeah. But that's a big one. Then taking that intimacy. So the work that I do with other guys allows me to have and with myself allows me to have really hard conversations and and dig into things I don't want to say. Like this move with the hands doesn't just mean like don't let things come to me, but also like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to admit that, all that. But as you can break through that shame, and if you can just get used to saying that, if you can just get you saying like this is shameful for me, like people, maintaining romantic, can maintain the romance, maintaining intimacy, physical intimacy is a nightmare. We joke, it's like there's nothing less sexy than having sex with someone that really knows you. and,
Yeah.
it's like and it's if you think of it, you're like, oh yeah, like you're like, oh, you're gonna make out with some rando, outside the bathroom at a club, or be married to somebody for 25 years, which is harder, right? And so you have to be able to like build a conversation, right? And most people like even this conversation about it, like it's really weird to say that, but you have to be willing. And I knew these people, and I knew people like in recovery, people have been together a long time, and they just could talk about anything. And that's really, really key. And it's okay to be weird. You're like, every few years I have to, it's so funny as I say it, seeing me now, every few years I have to rethink what I look like. Right? There's nothing worse than a guy that's like 70 years old and he's dressing like he's 25 years old, right? And he's never looked at like what he wants to look like over time. And so for
Exactly.
me, every few years, I talk to my wife. I'm like, how do I look? Right? Like, is this silly? Does this work for you? Does it work in the world? And but I'm so grateful for that, to be like, yeah, maybe don't do that, or maybe do that, or and so,
Well,
but
like along with what you're saying, the communication is key. Feeling safe in a relationship,
So you can ask that.
then also the communication. But then I think, to dig a little deeper, like you said, when we have these conversations, like when I have these conversations with you about relationships and stuff, I think we need to recognize also that, you know, we have to hold space for one another, meaning in a relationship, because we all come from our programming. We all come from whatever, again, my language, whatever trauma you've been through, whatever limitations were put on you or expressed to you about relationships. So now you come together with someone else who has their own beliefs and limitations. And now you're supposed to get together and just have this healthy situation and relationship. But then
yeah,
when things come up, you need to not only be able to express those things to your partner, that I'm having fear around this or shame around this, like you expressed, but then also for your partner to say, or hold space for you and listen like you did with her and say, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? And then there's the breakthrough. There's the breakthrough when you can come together and be able to come full circle, like we said, reason things out with someone, and come to a positive conclusion. Not, I tell you something and you tell me, well, you should just stop thinking that way and you'd be better off. Well, no, now you just shame me, and now I go away with that shoulda, coulda, woulda attitude, which
Yeah.
in my opinion are obstacles. Shoulda, coulda, woulda needs to be removed from your vocabulary in order to, I think, have a healthy relationship with yourself as well as another person.
Yeah, well, and I should say, and this is really funny. Recently, I was speaking at an event, and my wife was there, and we were laughing because, like, when I say this to what you're saying about holding space, I'm horrible at that. So, like, it's really funny. I mean, I'm really bad at it, and so for me, it takes a couple of tries before I can do that at best. And she's great at it. Like, and I joke that like she'll let me have some wacky idea or some bad idea, let's say, let's say less than functional idea for a long time. And what's required of that is a sense that you're okay, right? That you're okay and you're going to be okay. If not, because you won't always get along. We had to learn to argue. I don't argue fair. I don't fight fair. And I didn't
Mm.
understand that until and this is all impossible if you don't individually work on yourselves, right?
Right.
If
Right.
you don't have self-awareness, all you're going to do is go, no, I don't, right? That defensive,
Right.
no, no, I don't do that. And
Right.
so when we started, like we first got in fights, I have this really like horrible, like just beat on myself. And I do this really weird thing where I go to this really dark place of just self-loathing, and it makes me fight in a really weird way, like argue. When I say that, I mean argue. And she pointed out that I don't, that I didn't argue fair, and that I wouldn't just stay focused on what was being discussed, and that I would do some weird, like strange, thing. And she was right. I didn't want to hear it. I know I probably argued in that moment to say no, and but then I can go and call my team of people and spill and have someone else that I'm not as attached to talk to me about it.
Yes.
I talk about it till I go, oh, yeah, okay, you're right. And then go back, I'm sorry. But that's what you're talking about, that space. I talk about spiraling upward in relationships, right? Everybody talks about spiraling downward. I did this, and then she got mad and did this and that, and then I got mad about that, and then that hurt my feelings and I hurt her feelings, and you just to the bottom, right? If one of you can stop that,
Yes.
and either one of you, and be like, I'm not, maybe she didn't mean that. Maybe he didn't mean that. Maybe they're just having a minute. Maybe they're just hungry. Maybe whatever. But if you have bad ideas about yourself, right? If you feel shitty about yourself physically and someone doesn't want to have sex with you, all of a sudden you're tanked. Oh my God, I'm not sexy, and it's over.
Yep.
How about somebody can fucking be sick to their stomach? Whatever, right? How about somebody had a rough day at work? How about
Yeah.
that? Maybe not, you're not a piece of shit. But
Yeah.
everybody, not everybody, but people with low self-esteem, they're the problem. And that's that right to the bottom, pachinko machine. And so for me, like that ability to stop for a minute and be like, wait, hold on. Walk out of the room, call a friend, do something else, get yourself back and go back and go, okay, right? Or not, or just let it be there for a minute, right? And then it's okay. That kind of stuff we don't get taught, right? So one of my resentments against music and one of my difficulties is that all my music was so crazy codependent. All my music was predicated. What's that?
In the lyrics or the teams?
Oh, yes. My life, right?
Right.
Yes.
All of it.
Just
All of
yes.
the above.
Unbelievable, right? And so it was like, oh, well, if I don't have some, like if you look at pop culture in general. There are ideas about things that are just patently wrong. I mean, go back hundreds of years. Romeo and Juliet.
Oh
It's
my God.
great. They kill each other. They kill themselves. You're like, wait, they kill themselves. That's
And it's the
wait.
best
So,
love affair. You're like,
oh,
how is
oh,
this the
oh,
best love affair? This is
yeah,
the most tragic thing ever. But it's so
yeah.
beautiful. It's so awful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but it's like, what I mean, you're like, oh, like Romeo and Juliet. No, no, no. But so you got to go back like, like 1,000. It was. I didn't want to say that because if you go back 1,000 years, it's worse because there's no such thing as like an actual relationship. By the way, I just want to say to everyone, you can like call me, writing me, come up on the street, but you cannot tell me that the good old days were better. Because why? Because I was just trying to say, like, oh, maybe 1,000 years ago. No, 1,000 years ago, men owned women.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
insane, insane. You're like, no, it was not okay. Yeah.
And they
So,
weren't allowed to have an opinion or a voice. So right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
and
yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, so I would say
We
though,
weren't,
for me, that was a problem though. Oh, sorry, what were you saying? But
we weren't allowed to have land or own it, or we weren't allowed to own land or have a job. And also, people owned people
yeah.
a thousand
Oh,
years
oh.
ago. There was literally, I own you. I have bought.
It's a
And
whole thing,
what are you
Yeah.
talking about? Nothing. No, no, it's not.
we've come
The
so
good old days are
far,
not better.
yeah, in relationships, but
Hmm.
y- you know, especially with what you're saying in marriage and relationships, if you don't come to the table 100%, there is no such thing as 50-50. Each person has to do the work on themselves in order to be authentic enough to not only come to the relationship, but to be authentic enough and look at yourself. Like you said,
Yeah.
you take a break, you step away, you call a friend, one of your guys on the team, and say, hey, you know what, this just happened, I had this conversation, this is how I'm feeling. And then you get a different perspective, and somebody has said, well, from looking from the outside in, maybe you need to make an amends, or maybe you need to look at this because I see a pattern here as well. And I love you, I'm your friend, and I'm not married to you. So I get to say, hey, you know what? You might want to take a look at this, you know?
Yeah,
And that's
no,
the
it is.
key too, because we want to be, because you said earlier you don't say anything bad about the relationship. So it's not like some people go to the people, I had the fight, look what they did. You're talking about bringing it to people who you trust with to help you to see things clearly. And it's not that you're talking bad about it, as some listeners might be like, well, but he just said. No, we're talking about bringing it to people who can help you get right sized
Yeah.
and think in perspective, and bounce it off with, who also respect your wife and you and the marriage. And then you go, okay, because there's a lot of people who go to
Yeah.
friends who are like just going to sit there and co-sign their bullshit.
W-
You don't want that. It's more
Yeah, and
like
then you get those guys, of course, that say, "Oh, yeah, you should say this or you should do this." It's
dumper,
like misery loves company. Yeah, go having an affair,
go
dude.
have an
Show
affair,
her.
fuck
Yeah,
her.
no, dumbass. That's not why I'm calling
No,
you.
no, no, that's not what I did not call you for that.
Well, I think it's really important, like we said, to reason things out, but also to have a healthy network
Yeah, that's what I
of.
mean.
There's the thing. The key is having a healthy network of individuals, male and female, because I
Hmm.
have, like, I got you, I call you with some pretty hard stuff, and you and I reason stuff out. I have another female friend who's, you know, just I reason things out and she holds me accountable. And when I come to her and I say, oh, this happened or that happened, she's like, why are you even talking about this anymore? Why are you still telling this story? What does it have to do with you? And how is it
Yeah.
serving you?
How is it serving you is a
It,
great question.
yeah, how is this? I've had that question presented to me. What are you getting out of this? And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? I'm telling you something that just happened. Yeah, but you must be getting something out of it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so, engaged in
Yeah.
it.
So,
Yeah.
No, man,
mhm.
no, it's a big thing. I should also point out, by the way, that yes, I talk too much, but also there's a delay. So just so you guys know, we're having a little bit of that CNN thing where I'm like, oh,
No, I
hey,
saw that. I saw that you were pausing and hearing it
yeah,
and
yeah.
everything. Not talk too much.
But going to that though, there's a very weird, interesting thing in that too that I found that was like, um, is that this idea that, um, and when we got married, in my wife's vows, we wrote our own vows, and they were individual. And in her vows, she says, "Your patient love has healed me." And
Mm.
what she meant by that was not like I fixed her, but that I was able to just be fully self-standing. Something I talk about all the time, and I did a bunch of relationship work years ago that allowed me to do this. And in one of Pia Melody's books, she talks about like this idea, and I don't know if the image is hers or if it's mine. I don't know, but I got the idea from her, and that is that you think of two people and they're leaning on each other, like if you were holding each other's shoulders and leaning over. If one of them crumbles, you both fall. So the idea
Right.
is to be standing upright on your own, and then you can get as close as you need to or want to. And then if someone has to move away or whatever, you can. And the
Oh,
reason that's important is that people get sick. You have family problems. People die. You cannot live in this triangle because
Right.
sometimes you
Right.
can't both stand up, and someone's got to be there to pick the other one up or to carry the load. And that idea that, oh, I'll die without you, right?
mhm.
That's a really heavy thing. And that's part of that pop culture thing I was saying, right? Well, I'll die without you. I live every day knowing 100% certain, and it reassures me that if I were to die or leave for any reason, my wife would be okay. It's not what she wants. It's not what I want, but she's okay. And I got taught early on. I didn't observe it for the first like 30 something years of my life, but early on, a guy that had a really good marriage, in my opinion, told me, older guy, and he said, my wife doesn't need me. I don't need, we don't need each other to like survive. And that's a key thing, because then there's freedom for the other person, right? And so I will say
Really.
that that's a big thing about being self, like what you were talking about, Richard, is basically being, self-supporting unto yourself. And then you can choose to be together, right? That's a beautiful thing.
And in every aspect, it's not just the relationship or the emotional. It's got to be emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial. If your four pillars are strong, well, then you build a foundation not only for yourself so you could stand alone, but then you get to be in a relationship and support that relationship. And without support of one another and without holding space for one another, it's lost. The relationship is lost. Yeah.
I'll give you another one that I learned along the way that I did badly, that I do better now. But for men, particularly, I cannot speak for women, not being one, but I will speak for men. In my experience, it is a challenge to be with someone who is far more successful than yourself.
Absolutely.
And so I really blew up a relationship and had to, make an amends to a woman who made, at the time, probably 4 times what I made. And I was not comfortable living life at her level. Again, go back to can't receive, can't, oh, it's shameful to ask for anything. So we lived at my level when she was making 4 times what I made. How annoying is that? Right. So now my joke is that, my wife, among other things, my wife acts. And one of my jokes is that I'm so ready to be the guy on the red carpet holding the purse. I don't know if you ever watch like the Oscars
Yeah,
or
yeah,
where
Yeah.
yeah.
they have like
Like,
a husband. Yes. Yeah.
I
She's not
can't wait
famous.
to
Nobody
see that.
cares. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't
I'm so
wait
ready
to
to be just like holding the purse over on the corner, like
see
waiting. So
that.
we
start
have a
watching
photo. Yeah, we
TikTok.
have a photo on social media. Oh, was that? Oh yeah, my
What was
tiny purse.
yeah, it was a little bar.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
a
for those
little food bar.
not watching, he picked up a little tiny bar and held it up like a purse. It was hilarious.
Yeah,
No, but
so, and
that's when
we have a photo on social media. We were at the Academy, and not at the Oscars, but at the Academy offices, and they have a giant Oscar. And we have a photo where it's Annalise standing by the Oscar getting a picture made, and I'm off to the side holding her purse, and it's like my favorite photo
I
ever.
love
Yeah,
I
but I
love
mean, but being able to deal with that is a weird, like there's like, again, the ego stuff. I joke, it's like nobody wants to hear men cry about how hard it is to be a man, but we got, like we got a lot of really weird programming. So I appreciate you, Richard, a lot. I
thank
appreciate both y'all for doing this. This is a good, a really good thing, and it's good that you have. I laugh, man. It's hard to have more pure, uncut male energy than Richard. So I appreciate that you have a female
you.
host.
Well, funny you say that about the holding the purse and stuff. I said a long time ago, man, if I met, and this is not to downplay men or downplay myself as far as, because I got more drive and, I've worked
Yeah.
3 jobs in my life and I still will until the rest of my, but my point is, if I had a wife, I always said I would be a stay home GI Joe dad for sure.
Oh,
And I'll mow the lawn, I'll do the laundry, I'll do, you go out and get after it, I'll take care of the kids, the pets, whatever you need me to do, but I will get after that shit like a Navy SEAL, but yeah.
But
that's
here
good.
now, but here's a question. It's a very interesting question though. You're a successful man by any measure. You've
Thank you.
successful. Could you do that if you weren't, right? And that's the thing for me, right?
Yeah, I know
I
what you're saying.
right? You see what I'm
Yep.
saying? So for me, I know now it would be easier for two things. One, that I've had some success, regardless of if that should validate me or not. It does. It's our culture. But I've also done this work. I'm curious now if I could have just done the work, and just been like, cool, stay at home husband, right? I don't know. I gotta say, if I'm honest with myself, I don't know. And
Yeah.
so it's fascinating. I will say that it is easier, and I understand it, but it also allows you to then, man, it allows you really to root for that other person. You talk about the talking positively, right?
Yeah.
No one wants my wife to succeed more than I do, because I'm not scared she's going to leave me. I'm not scared that, somehow, I'll be replaced, right? I'm not scared that my only value to her is whether I pay the bills, right? Because we're together no matter what. The freedom to be able to be to fail, freedom to be unsexy sometimes. I mean, I know that's hard looking at me, but sometimes I'm not sexy. uh, the
It's like,
freedom to
You are a sexy beast. You're both
freedom,
sexy beasts. Your wife is
the
gorgeous.
freedom to get old, right? The freedom to age, right? You know what I
yeah,
mean? The freedom,
Right?
the freedom to get sick, right? The for that's the thing that it's what you're looking for, right? And and yeah, and like, let's wrap it on this, is that my wife, in my process of like trying to figure out how to have a relationship, I became willing to go out with people that I wasn't necessarily attracted to. And the reason that I did that was that I wanted to understand that maybe what I was attracted to was not the best thing for me. Maybe there was something programmed into me that was wrong. And so it was like, well, let me go out with some just people that I normally wouldn't go out with. And I was willing to do that. And I always tell people, I usually say it in a really coarse way, and people get really like mad about it. And so I just say now, it's like, be willing to go out with somebody that you wouldn't normally pick. One,
right.
because I met some outrageously amazing women, and even if it didn't click, it was like I was able to see, um, but then the trick that happened to me is that, my wife is beautiful, she's amazing, but yeah, at this point, I would, left to my own devices, I was not going to ask her out. And again, I had that friend, and I
Yeah.
did. That is a true story. I called my friend, and we were trying to figure out, and really, I tell people, like, if you want to succeed at anything, try to get as clear as you can about what you want. You
Right.
can't go anywhere. If you got in the car, you have to know, I want to go to the grocery store. Otherwise, you will just drive around randomly, and you might pass a grocery store, but you will not
Right.
necessarily guarantee. But I can promise, if you get in the car and say, I'm going to Kroger, I will get groceries. And so
You
for
got
me,
out
it
of
was like,
right.
yeah, what, so what do I want? And I was saying that, and I knew that we had been friends. She and I had been friends, and we both had broken up with people. And it was like, yeah, her. And it was like, he had, again, like with my friend in Arkansas, it was like he had said, hey man, you should just go to the moon. Right. But I gritted my teeth, and I asked her out. And, and then, one small step at a time, you know,
Just
and,
let the
and also I
flow.
never lied to her about who I was, right? Understood who I was as best I could. And I didn't put on a show, and so then the trick is, you can't fool yourself that if all this went away, she wouldn't like me. I never made up some story about who I was, right? I joke. It's like I took her on a date in my '85 Volvo. Fairly soon, she knew my financial situation, good or bad. It was not great then, but but I was open and honest with her about who I was, and she was like, "Yeah, that's it." I'll tell you something interesting too. So I come from not only farmers, but rodeo cowboys. My dad was
What?
my dad's an amazing cowboy. My nephews are pro rodeo. One of them's on the pro bull riding tour right now, and one of them's on a
Wow.
college rodeo team.
awesome.
So yeah, so I come from like, yeah, no, those belt buckles are not like that. Actually, the next time you see me, the belt buckle I'm wearing is actually from my nephew. They loan them to me, and then I have my dad's trophy buckle from 1962. But
Wow.
Oh,
but
That's
so my
awesome.
wife had written, she had a vision board, and it had on it a dress that she ended up having, a wedding dress that looked like that. It had a ring that looks almost identical in size and design to what she has. And it had, a log cabin, which we haven't gotten yet, but we do have a cabin in the desert. And then on it, a big headline, it says, "The Last Cowboy in Town." And she was prepared to move to Texas, and she had bought a house in Texas and was going to go to Texas and go try to meet somebody, and we got together. And so we both had this idea of what we wanted, and it lined up.
I
So
remember your wedding. I remember being at your wedding. It was awesome.
crazy.
Dude, I can't even tell you how proud I am of you. I mean, you and I go back a long way, a long, long way. And man, to see the transformation, to see where you were then and where you are now, I mean, it just warms my heart. And I can't even express my gratitude for you being my friend, being a stand up man. You got your lights on, bro. And you said that to me. I like to be around guys who have their lights on, and you do. I'm extremely proud of you, bro. I'm glad to
Thank you.
say I'm
Appreciate it.
your friend. You're my
Thank you.
friend.
Thank you. Thank you
Right
guys.
on.
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
This
y'all
was
so much
awesome.
for having me. This is super fun. Just
Yeah.
keep doing it. We, to end, just keep doing it. We have to, you got to spread better messages, right? We came up with some really bad programming. So you too. Thank you so much.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
bro.
being here with us.
All right, bro.
Thanks.
Peace.
You're fantastic.
Hey
Bye.
now.